Hello everyone, I'm number one Marmaduke fan. For years I have studied and loved the history of art, particularly from the late medieval age through the Renaissance, but also up to the present day. Deeply related to my love of art was my love of the American newspaper comic strip and superhero comic book, which introduced me to some of the first artists I would forever know by name. This love blossomed into a love of animation, painting, sculpture, printmaking. As I went, I discovered new loves for the art of other nations, Japan being a prime example, from their ancient painting and printmaking to popular media like manga and anime. My idea of a dream come true would be to create, appreciate, and discuss art every day of my life. Why waste time on crude politics? However, as I learned more about the history of art in school, I became more aware of the importance of topics like religion, politics, and philosophy when discussing the meaning of art. Take, for example, the political movement of feminism, which I think has had the greatest effect on how art is taught, understood, and created in American universities and the West in general. As I learned about art in the 20th century in art school, I took an open sponge approach. I had my own biases, thoughts, and deeply held religious beliefs, but I saw my role as a student to soak in information. Yet in some ways, I came away from that experience with more confusion than clarity. I had experienced instances of bullying and other toxic forms of behavior, most often from students, sometimes from instructors, for whom my race, sex, religion, and sexual orientation were viewed as critical to how I should be treated and how my arguments should be evaluated. The name I learned to describe this group was social justice warriors, and I believe this term to be a thoroughly fair and apt description of the behavior and mindset I experienced in that environment. At that time, I made a clear distinction in my mind between the behaviors of individuals and the ideas they espoused. Certain people may have treated me in a bizarre or nasty manner, but I understood that they did not represent everyone who might agree with them on this or that political issue or belief. I did not want these negative experiences to cloud my ability to use reason and logic to appraise their arguments. During that season in my life, I believe I found many of the arguments and ideas from the American political left to be persuasive, challenging many of the assumptions and ideas I had from growing up in the deep red Midwest. But I would be lying if I pretended that these instances of cruel behavior I experienced did not color my view of the various movements and ideas we might call social justice warriorism. For years, these thoughts and emotions stewed within me. I had carefully read and written about scores of Marxist and feminist thinkers for my classes, and though I was happy with what I had learned about art, my emotions were always mixed about this aspect of my educational experience. In a deep red state, it was difficult to talk about these subjects in detail with my family. Yet in my educational environment, the challenge was different than having a polite discussion at the Thanksgiving table. I was constantly reminded that how I worded myself and what I revealed about what I sincerely believed to be true might land me in trouble. For example, if I heard a feminist argument which I found unconvincing or downright fallacious, I didn't feel safe expressing that in a straightforward way. I chose rather to try to couch my argument in vague language. Sometimes this keep your head down strategy worked, but other times it didn't. Every day, it seemed, came an experience which reminded me of the importance of keeping silent. Overheard conversations about how fun it would be to do violence to pro-life activists handing out leaflets near the school. Jokes about how disgusting and human both Republican politicians and their voters were. Derisive laughter about people who believed in the miracles of Jesus. A flash of anger and a blunt correction from a professor when I described someone I believed to be a girl as she instead of he or Z. Neutral conversations about the need to suppress students and opinions deemed problematic. I learned the unwritten rule, yet the more I followed it, the more conflicted I felt. During this time as a student, I essentially stopped playing games and reading comics to allow me more time to focus on my studies. So, the first time I heard of Gamergate came in the form of professors and teaching assistants leading classroom discussions on how sinister and misogynist this movement was supposed to be. Naturally, this piqued my curiosity as someone who had passionately enjoyed games in my youth, and still occasionally played them. To my surprise, I discovered a healthy debate about the role of feminism, politics, and the arts unfolding on YouTube, a platform I saw mostly as a place for funny videos. I will not say I was red-pilled, because I don't think I was ever a progressive or a true believer in social justice as an idea in my heart. Yet I was encouraged to find new perspectives on these topics. Ideas burned in my head about what I was reading and how valuable it would be to this ongoing discussion. But concern for my studies, and maybe a fear of discovery and reprisal, led me to keep my head low once again. I watched Gamergate happen from the sidelines, as I had become accustomed to watching political elections unfold from the sidelines, my thoughts burning in my head, but knowing to keep quiet. After graduating, I was happy. I made art. I loved my job. I read books for pleasure again. But I also began to dwell on my mortality. I wanted my life to mean something, and I wanted to leave something behind of value. Not just live for my own entertainment. I envisioned something vaguely about doing videos on educational topics, but what would I talk about? My art teachers had taught me skill, passion, focus. But what next for me? Then I discovered a YouTube channel called Diversity in Comics. Shakily recorded on a phone, he talked about comics and political movements and ideas which were intruding into the world of comics. After hearing his glowing review of Mr. Miracle #1, I had to read it. After failing to find it at multiple stores, I got the very last copy at the last comic book shop I checked. I had bought and read plenty of comics and graphic novels during my time in school, even writing a thesis on the history of comics, but I believe this was the first new floppy superhero comic I had bought as an adult. My 10-year hiatus from the world of superhero comics had ended. I was hooked. At some point, I created a Twitter account called #1 Marmaduke Fan. This was an in-joke. At some point, the Diversity in Comics channel had joked about needing to create a second Twitter as a way of keeping up with news on comics professionals who had blocked him, throwing out the name #1 Marmaduke Fan. A day or so after he made that video, I saw the name had still not been claimed, and on a whim, took the name and tweeted at him for a joke. I began using this username to interact with other fans of the channel and was introduced to a number of active comic book YouTubers. I was buying dozens of comics and shared pictures to start conversations with other fans. I owe a great debt to the Diversity in Comics channel for convincing me to go to a comic book store and buy a superhero comic book. But I was a long way away from finding the focus I was looking for. 2 or 3 months passed. Then I purchased a manga, The Legend of Zelda: Twilight Princess by Akira Himekawa. As I read, my mind raced. I remembered my whole educational experience, the many voices I had heard discussing politics, religion, art, and philosophy. Something clicked in my mind. Even though I was unsure of exactly what I wanted to say, I remembered the fear and trembling which had characterized my time in school and became convinced that if I didn't start talking about what was on my mind now, I would never be brave enough to do it. On a whim, I shot a rambling video talking about how the manga had affected me and the thoughts it had prompted about social justice. In the following weeks, I have continued to make video after video talking about something I love, the art of comics. Having a silly username encouraged me to express thoughts I never thought of expressing out loud before. But my desire has never been to just be nasty or offensive to people I disagree with politically. It's become a place where I can be myself, and what I want to do is encourage people to draw and make all kinds of art. Doing this has outed me. Once I dreamed of trying to talk about serious subjects behind anonymity, about being thorough and careful in my research to produce excellent discussions of the topics I was interested in. But the #1 Marmaduke Fan username became a place to experiment. I didn't have to obsess over polish or detail. I found my voice making fun videos about comic books, many of which you can hear me joking about just how silly I find this whole thing I've been doing. A while ago on Twitter, I wrote a poll asking my friends and followers a question. If I were to start doing videos on social justice and feminism, should I make a new channel or publish them on the same channel as my comic book reviews? As a joke, I threw in "shut up and get to work" as an option on the poll. A few people thought I should create a new channel, and more thought it was fine to share whatever I wanted on this channel, but the clear winner was "shut up and get to work." I took this to heart. Rather than obsessing over the content of this channel and whether I should have multiple channels to organize content, it was more important that I do careful research and produce solid, helpful content. I am pleased to announce a new series of videos for this channel on the history of feminism and the arts. You may have heard me jokingly refer to this as Project Chrono Triggered, because, just like in the game Chrono Trigger, we have to go back to the roots of social justice warriorism and the idea of the culture war. This is a topic I think is very important for any discussion about the arts, whether it is the high arts in prestigious galleries and museums, or the low arts, entertainment enjoyed by a wider group of people, whether it's comics, movies, or television. While feminism might be seen as just part of the broader umbrella of the social justice movement, and many progressive groups might be seen as very important to these discussions, I think the feminist art movement and the feminist philosophy of art specifically might be the most relevant when we are having conversations about questions like these. What is art? What is good art? Should politics enter into art? Feminism and anti-feminism is still a hot topic of discussion on YouTube, but this is an aspect where I think my education and my interests might enable me to add something helpful, something I haven't seen other channels talking about in much detail. The plan for this series is for me to read and thoroughly discuss a number of books, essays, and articles on the topic of feminism and the arts. I hope to be rigorous and fair in representing these works, and not strawman them or rewrite them to make them easy to dismiss or ridicule. Whether you are an anti-feminist or a vocal advocate of feminism, I hope you will agree that I am trying to be as accurate and truthful as I can when discussing this often controversial subject. Over time, I would like those who watch this video series to have a broad understanding of the key thinkers and ideas within the feminist art movement, and how the ideas of this group have permeated the larger culture and national conversation. While it's all well and good for me to say that my intention is to be objective, that is easier said than done, which is why I'm committing here to always having my comment section open. If you think I'm unfair in how I represent any opinion or argument, I invite you to challenge me. I want a rigorous debate so that I can refine my thesis and discard bad arguments and false impressions. I want the most robust feminist arguments and the most robust anti-feminist arguments. I don't want to poison the well by declaring what my conclusion is before I begin this project, but I do think it's only fair to let you know a bit about myself and what my opinions are. I am not a feminist. I do not use the label anti-feminist for myself that often, though, since I want to have a more informed opinion on what feminism is. I anticipate doing this series will be a learning process for myself, and I hope it can be instructive to you as well. Some critics of modern campus feminism, like Professor Christina Hoff Sommers, also known as the factual feminist, have argued against contemporary feminism, but not against all forms of feminism. You might say the idea is we shouldn't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Others, like members of Honey Badger Radio, have argued that the problems with contemporary feminism are more firmly rooted in the history of the movement. I don't know enough to have a well-informed opinion on that disagreement. Given that feminism and social justice are such broad topics, it might be fun to occasionally talk about these more general ideas, but mostly I want to stay on target. I want to discuss the history of feminist art with you and why it has become important outside feminist circles. Whether you love video games, sports, anime, books, movies, or comics, you've likely encountered feminist ideas in discussions about the topics you love. I want those who share my love of comics and are involved in conversations about politics in comics to know where concepts like the male gaze came from, and the theories and ideas which have shaped the contemporary left's view of art. If you've been a fan of this channel, don't worry. I will continue to review comic books, tell jokes, and have fun on this channel, because that's what this channel has become for me, a place to talk about things I love with people who share my interests. Most of my videos will continue to be art critiques, jokes, reviews, casual thoughts on comics and why I love them. This series, investigating feminist art, will be just one part of this channel. If you are a follower of mine and think that another channel might be a better place for a series like this, I'm open to suggestions and comments because I want you to enjoy this channel, but I do plan to demonstrate why I think it's relevant to comics discussions. Expect videos in this series about once a week. I hope that the work for this series will speak for itself. This is an important topic and I take this project seriously. Of course, that doesn't mean we can't have a little fun along the way. After all, what else would you expect from a channel called #1 Marmaduke Fan?